Well, greetings, Red Deer. Mayor Ken here today. And of course, the first question is, Mayor, why are you standing up? Well, there's no better way to pay homage to this incredible piece of history here, this barber chair. I'm here at Red Stag Barbers in Capstone, and I came across this incredible chair. We're going to do our interview in the chair today, which is really a special treat. And Clayton, it's always good to see you. And so on. And I really have to say, the decor here is nothing but spectacular. So I'm really enjoying it. And folks, if you're looking for a lovely piece of history as well as great service and so on, hop down the Red Stag. So Clayton, good to see you.
In March, Council was presented the third quarter crime statistics from the RCMP. Mayor Ken, can you talk about what strategies might be contributing to the 19% decrease in persons crimes and 17% decrease in property crimes?
You know, that's a great question. That's a pretty broad question. And those particular categories, persons crimes and property crimes, have been declining for a long time now in Red Deer. So to try to give it some context, I would say circa 2018, 2019, the RCMP employed a strategy called Pinpoint here in the city. Pinpoint, as the name suggests, targeted repeat offenders who were out on parole or had completed a sentence, but were very apt because of their tendencies, if you will, to recommit crimes and so on. And statistically, it was shared with us at the time that 80% of the persons in property crime being committed in Red Deer were being committed by about 20% of the what I would call jailed or in criminality sections of our population. So that particular emphasis, Pinpoint, started to enforce outstanding warrants, started to do parole checks, started to do more checking, and so on, and began to discover that our rates of crime started to go down the more that we checked in with that particular population. That is just one factor. The other factor, and there are several others, is public education. The public's getting smarter on defending its own property. More doors are being locked, more vehicles are not left running with the keys in the ignition, if you will, and so on. People are hiring or asking neighbors to come and check their properties, especially if they're away, things like that. That's certainly a big factor. Public education itself is also a big factor in terms of knowing your risk. Just recently, the RCMP employed a drone strategy in Red Deer. Some folks may have seen a drone active in Red Deer, which assists officers when they go on calls and so on, particularly on high-risk calls or opportunities where a second hazard may exist, like a fire, for example, or whatever. So there isn't just one factor. I think the trend is very encouraging. I mean, I've been around on council, Clayton, since 2013, and you know, at one time, those crime rates were very, very high. It was not unusual for people to be reporting break-ins and so on very frequently, and persons crimes very frequently, assaults and so on, this kind of thing. So it's really encouraging to see these categories go down, and especially go down over a 5-year trend. That's when you really know you're doing something right. So that's a few of the ways for sure. And I certainly would encourage people to continue to report, continue to monitor their own neighborhoods, look out for your own neighbor, those kinds of things. Everything helps.
Okay. With fraud-related crime showing a decrease as well, can you talk about the youth and community action teams and how they supported education?
Yeah, thank you. You know, the RCMP, I must say, is quite proactive in our city in terms of getting out and getting a message to prevent crime. So the Youth and Community Action Team is a good example of that. It's not uncommon for this team to be out in places like the Golden Circle, for example, talking to seniors about how to avoid fraud and you know, sort of criminal trespass on people. They do an awful lot of work in the school systems. They do parent information nights. They go to community events. They'll show up at community associations and those kinds of things, and really inform the people. Fraud usually takes its root and becomes problematic when people don't understand how frauds are committed or what the warning signs might be. So this particular group, I have to say, I know some of the members, and they've been very, very active in Red Deer for, oh gosh, the last 5 years at least. Um, they are very specific in how they bring messages of prevention, particularly as the name suggests, one on the youth side, because it's easy for our youth to fall into fraud, sometimes tragic fraud as it relates to internet activity and those kinds of things. But certainly on the other side of the spectrum, there's our seniors and adults that are typically single and maybe wanting more of a connection, and they make themselves more vulnerable to fraud. So great piece of work being done by them.
Awesome. Council has scheduled a public hearing for June 23rd, 2025 to discuss the potential transition of electric utility to a city-owned MCC. Mayor Ken, what are the anticipated benefits of this transition for Red Deer residents, and how can they participate in the decision-making process?
Well, if we wanted to be on the air for the next 7 hours, I could certainly be happy to explain all of the complexity there. That is a big question, but I'm glad you asked it, because really when we come to the public hearing 3 months from now, that will be the question that's on the public's mind, I hope, is why are we making the change and what benefit does it bring to Red Deerians? So the whole issue of utility ownership and governance, Clayton, came from the reality that the market for electricity and the complexity around electricity is expanding. When you think of the advances in technology around electric transportation, for example, cars, buses, trucks, those kinds of things, alternate sources of electricity, wind, solar, etc. And then you put that up against the capacity of a city to be able to navigate that landscape successfully. Not just navigate it from a financial perspective, which is a challenge, but navigate it from an expertise perspective, which is also a challenge. Red Deer is one of only 5 cities in Alberta now that has its own utilities. And so that's more of, I think, an issue of we were able to have a utility and a successful utility all the way through to this point in time. And now we have to decide that, given the immensity of the issue, should we consider something else? So MCC is called a municipally controlled corporation. That's what it stands for. So we had to balance the expertise that council brings or doesn't bring. I'm not really an electric in any way authority and so on. So it's expertise, it's access to capital. In other words, cities have a certain amount of money they can borrow and they cannot go beyond that under the MGA, whereas electrification in our province and certainly in our city is an expensive undertaking, and it'll continue to be more expensive. Even when you think of charging stations, all of the infrastructure that we're going to need, that was a couple of components, as I say, as governance and access to capital, but also publicly owned. Council also needs to weigh, we own that utility now. Do we sell it, for example, or do we continue to govern it in a different way? Or do we go back to our existing model as a city utility? All challenges around that. So MCC, as council deliberated a few months ago, was worth exploring more. And that's really what the public hearing is all about. I'll be interested to hear comprehensively what industry thinks, because we have players like Olymel, we have players like the hospital. The city itself is a huge consumer of electricity. So I'll be interested to see what the industry thinks. I'll be interested to see what the business community in general thinks. So the chamber, for example, etc. And I'll also be interested in hearing from citizens that currently own the utility. I mean, the utility is a piece of you and me in Red Deer. And I'll be interested to get that perspective as well, and council will, of course. So this is what the public hearing will be all about. We're anticipating, and I'm hoping, for a broad turnout of people because this is a big issue in our city.
Okay. EPR legislation set to be implemented April 1st.
Yes.
Shifting recycling responsibilities to producers. Mayor Ken, can you talk about how these savings will be realized and what it means for the average household?
Absolutely. So EPR or extended producer responsibility has been a topic in, I would say, Canada for 6 or 7 years now. In Alberta, a little less of a time, but now it's here. It's on the landscape now. And essentially what that means is there's a shift away from, again, cities and the citizens that pay the bills in our city, the collection bills, the recycling bills. There's been a shift away from that to the producers. So if you can imagine a cereal box, Weetabix or whatever is your favorite, Clayton, prior to EPR legislation, the box itself and the plastic wrapping around the cereal was left with consumers and it was left with cities to recycle. Under this legislation, that shifts to the actual producer of the product. So in Red Deer's case, we were able to save, I don't know the exact figure, but I'll say about $1.6 million or $1.7 million in recycle fees. Because that shifts over now to a central source. And therefore, we were able to take that $1.6 million and bring the saving across the board to Red Deer. And so on average, you'll save about $5 to $6 a month on your recycle bill. And that will be a permanent saving because EPR is here to stay now. And the city has jumped on board. So we'll start to see on the 1st of April, no change in your collection. It'll still be the blue cart, the green cart, the black cart, all that good stuff. That won't change. But the cost of the blue cart, I'm speaking of specifically, the blue cart will go down.
Okay. Now, the HHIC expressed concerns to City Council regarding the increase in admin fees for the Reaching Home Funding Indigenous stream from 5% to 15%. Council resolved to decrease these fees by 10% by April 1st, 2025. Mayor Ken, what prompted the initial increase and how will the adjusted fees impact homelessness initiatives?
I really appreciate that question because it was quite a discussion yesterday in council. So HHIC, Clayton, is the Housing and Homelessness Integrated Committee. So it's a committee struck by the city to find ways of combating homelessness and increasing housing stock and so on. Where the matter first came to council was in the budget in the fall as a way of increasing administrative revenue for the city's role in how it rolls out the work of that committee. So administratively, we have people that work with agencies and so on. They're on the city's bill, if you will, but the federal and provincial government allows the city to take a portion of the costs up to 15% of the grant, for example, as administrative costs. So a $100,000 grant would mean a $15,000 administrative fee to carry it out. But what that means is only $85,000 will make its way to the agency to do its work. In the case of the Indigenous stream, council reconsidered the fee going from 5% to 15% and backed it down to 10% for a couple of reasons. The main one was the what I would call overrepresentation of Indigenous people in the homelessness sector. So 40%, 45% of homeless people are Indigenous people. And yet the population, the Indigenous population of Red Deer is just over 5%. So there's quite an imbalance between the two. And that caused council to say the value of the dollars going to the Indigenous community was far more urgent in this particular case, where we could absorb, as a city, we could absorb the 5% reduction that we had given. So we did it, certainly from a reconciliation perspective, recognizing the overrepresentation, but we also understood that particular population needed the funding of, I would argue, far more than other agencies.
Okay. What measures are being taken to ensure that administrative costs remain transparent and justifiable in funding allocations for homelessness?
Yeah, also a great question, Clayton, because we have to be equitable, we have to be fair to all agencies across the board. So there's a couple of mechanisms that we have. One is the committee that I spoke to about, which was the Housing and Homelessness Integrated Committee. They have a funding subcommittee that goes through the contracts, that makes public the information once contracts are signed and so on, so people understand how much money is going to whom and what it's for and so on. Because these are public dollars, these are typically provincial dollars or federal dollars that are being used for that. So that is one avenue. The other one is the city's own budget process and our financial statements. They include those numbers so people are able to access the information when they get them. Transparency is really the bedrock of being in a situation where public funds are used, and those are the two primary outlets.
Okay. So yesterday, the Integrity Commissioner presented a summary of activities over the past year. Mayor Johnson, how has the establishment of the Integrity Commissioner role impacted the ethical standards and accountability within the council since its inception in September 2023?
Yeah, this was our first report from the Integrity Commissioner yesterday since we established it in September 2023. So about 15 months or so, 16 months that we had heard the report. Our Integrity Commissioner was created when we redesigned our Code of Conduct bylaw. The Code of Conduct bylaw exists so that the public can have confidence in its elected representatives. When you enter public service, you have an obligation, and the public has every right to expect that your conduct will be exemplary. Your personal conduct, certainly your public conduct, how you maintain yourself in council, how you maintain yourself in the community at large, those kinds of things, ensuring you don't have conflict of interest or any pecuniary interest in issues is critical. The old bylaw had complaints coming through the mayor's office, which automatically created a political lens to complaints that were made on councillors. So that became problematic. And we've had, since we brought the bylaw in 2019, I would say 6, certainly 5 that I can think of, codes of conduct. So we opted for a far more transparent system with the Integrity Commissioner. We redesigned our bylaw. We appointed an Integrity Commissioner, and not just an Integrity Commissioner. He, in this case, is also an ethics advisor. So it's a place to go for councillors who are unsure of what they should say or are able to say or should do or not able to do in situations in the public. The ethics advisor can give that advice and also give them advice on things like conflict of interest and so on, which is difficult from time to time to sort out. The great thing about it now is that he was able to say yesterday the number of complaints, he's only had one in 2024, which he dismissed as frivolous. And he's been accessed, of course, in his capacity as advisor 4 times by counsel. Prior to that, it was a bit of mismatch, frankly, as to who was giving advice and how qualified they were to give advice and whether they should even give advice to an elected official. Here you have someone with the legal qualifications and the municipal qualifications to be able to do that. So we heard yesterday from the ethics commissioner that our bylaw now has become a model for other cities. It's been adapted by Medicine Hat. It's been adapted by Fort McMurray. It's been adapted by Strathcona County, and several other municipalities are looking at making the same move, if you will, in the direction that that we have. They benefit from a cost perspective, and it's sort of touch wood or modified steel or whatever the case may be that we have here. We set aside $80,000 for the Integrity Commissioner in 2024, and we only spent $8,500. And so, we're seeing, I think the benefits of bringing that professional party to the table.
Okay, well, that's great. Is there anything else from the March council meetings that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, I will say, Clayton, to my regret, and I expressed this in the community, we had an incident a few weeks ago where a small group of people, just not a big group of people, demonstrated in front of our refugee offices and so on with a message, a very unkind, a very untypical, a very un-Red Deer message. And that was really go home and you have no place here, you have no function here, your contribution is not valued. So I just wanted to commend all the members of the public who wrote me or texted me or whatever and said how much they appreciated that we reacted quickly and condemned that kind of messaging. And I'll tell you, there's nothing that warmed my heart more than attending what's called the Power of One. The Power of One has been around our community for about 10 years. It's a gathering of people around racial harmony and opportunity for people, and it recognizes what new Canadians and immigrants and have done in terms of building our city. So that Power of One this year, normally they get a turnout of about 120, 125 people. They had over 200 people there this year, which was so great to see. So I just wanted to thank all Red Deerians out there, for their reaction. It certainly, galvanized a lot of people to say, hey, that's not us. That's not our city. Our city is a better and a more inviting city than that. So I just wanted to say that. Well, I think we're signing out, Red Deer. And again, check this out, and just the ambiance here at Red Stag today. It's been a treat, Clayton, to be with you and the team today. And until next time, Red Deer, this is Mayor Ken saying stay safe, and we'll see you in a few weeks.